is a presentation of the Belly Up Sports Media Network.
Welcome to the Morgan Man Sports Podcast. I'm your host, Stacey Cole Morgan. Here on the Morgan Man Sports Podcast, we talk Atlanta Falcons news, pre-game predictions, and all other news surrounding the Atlanta Falcons.
Touchdown, Atlanta!
Also on the podcast, we talk Call of Duty League, esports covering Roster Mania, major predictions, COD champs, player trades, and much more to get you ready for every single CDL weekend.
Scuff goes through, and Scuff snaps, wins the one-on-one, and Optic with the reverse sweep.
If that sounds good with you, put on your Falcons jersey, grab your gaming headset, and let's get this show started. What is going on, you guys? I'm your host, Stacey Cole Morgan, and you are listening to the Morgan Man Sports Podcast here on Spotify, Google Podcasts, GoodPod HQ, or wherever you find your preferred podcast. Ladies and gentlemen, today we are talking about the Atlanta FaZe winning the Major 1 tournament in Riyadh this past weekend. And let me tell you, FaZe has put the rest of the CDL on notice with that pure dominance of what a team should look like in the Call of Duty League has been on full display, especially going up against the Los Angeles Thieves, who are considered the super team going into the season. So we got a lot to talk about in that one right there, ladies and gentlemen. And also, we do got some Atlanta Falcons news to talk about today, and that is Pro Bowler Myles Garrett. That's right, ladies and gentlemen. Pro Bowler Myles Garrett has requested a trade from the Cleveland Browns organization and is looking to get his first Super Bowl in his career. So we're going to talk a little bit more about that and how that relates to the Atlanta Falcons moving forward. So without any further delay, let's go get straight into today's action. All right, you guys. So we are talking about the Atlanta Falcons first to start the podcast off right here. So Falcons have been seen as a prime trade candidate to land four-time All-Pro Bowl pass rusher Myles Garrett. At this point, it's no secret what the Atlanta Falcons' next big acquisition needs to be. It's the same position they've either chosen or to neglect or attempted to patchwork through cheaper means over the last several years, aka a talented pass rusher. In 2024, the Falcons were once again the worst in the NFL at getting to the quarterback. They finished 31st in sacks, 20th in QB pressures, and 25th in pressure percentage, with the quarterback position looking to be shored up thanks to a lofty draft selection of Michael Penix Jr. at the number 8 overall position. At last year's NFL draft, Falcons fans are begging for a fix on that defensive side of the ball. Well, that fix could very well come in the 2025 NFL draft, where Atlanta picks number 15th overall in the first round, or it could come up through a trade for one of the NFL's best pass rushers. On Monday, the Cleveland Browns edge rusher Myles Garrett put his request for a trade in, citing his desire to play in a Super Bowl. And I quote, "While I love calling this city home, my desire to win and compete on the biggest stages won't allow me to be complacent," if I'm pronouncing that right, Garrett said in the post. "The goal was never to go from Cleveland to Canton. It was always to compete for and win a Super Bowl. With that in mind, I've requested to be traded from the Cleveland Browns." Once the announcement of Garrett's request was made public, potential landing spots for former defensive pass rusher of the year began circulating. To no surprise, one of those teams was in need of a pass rusher, and that was the Atlanta Falcons. Without a doubt, Garrett could be a massive upgrade to Atlanta's defensive front, likely making an immediate impact on the Falcons could somehow work out a trade with the Browns. The season, Garrett tied for 4th in sacks, 14th, 18th in QB hits, 13th, and 2nd in hurries, 56, and 1st in total pressures, 83. That's why Sports Talk Atlanta suggested the Falcons should exhaust all resources in acquiring the 4-time All-Pro Bowler The only issue is that multiple reports have stated that the Browns have no intentions of trading the 29-year-old. Recently, the Cleveland Browns have been adamant that they will not trade Garrett and will not take any calls, the Athletic Diana Rossini said. Garrett has 2 years remaining on his 5-year, $125 million deal, which is signed back in 2020. Though the Falcons would need to address the cap situation heading into next season, Garrett's $19.7 million in 2025 and $20.4 million in 2026 are manageable. What he may demand in a new deal afterward could be one of the highest for a defensive player in NFL history. New Falcons defensive coordinator Jeff Ulrich would undoubtedly be welcoming a player of Garrett's caliber to his unit for his first season. Right now, however, the Browns and Garrett seem to be at a standstill. Regardless, the Falcons should absolutely make some calls, and I do believe so in this situation. The Atlanta Falcons do have a chance to go after the most sought-after talent there is on that defensive end. No joke. Ever since the Vic Beasley season in 2016, where he had that monster season, making the all-time record for Atlanta Falcons quarterback sacks, and then ultimately fell off. This is something that the Atlanta Falcons desperately need going into the season. So if I'm Terry Fontenot, I am making phone calls at least 20 times a day to make sure that Myles Garrett is going to come my way. Because this is what the city wants. This is what the organization wants. Is someone who could get to the quarterback and ultimately stop the opposing team's offense and get them off the field. So that way Michael Penix Jr., Bijan, and Drake London could cook, essentially. So I'm looking forward to it. Now, again, I am recording this on Monday, February 3rd at 5:44 p.m. Eastern. So if anything does change, I will have an emergency podcast earlier in the week or later in the week before that Friday's episode does go live. But I just don't think anything's going to happen between February 3rd and February 7th or whatever Friday's podcast is. Yeah, the 7th, when you are actually hearing this right now. I just don't think nothing's going to happen between now and then. But things can happen. So we'll wait and see what happens in regards to that. But if the Falcons do land Myles Garrett, I will make an emergency podcast discussing the potential of this trade from the Falcons, from the Browns, and what it means going forward in this offseason. It would actually be Raheem Morris's biggest acquisition for the Atlanta Falcons organization right here. And of course, Terry Fontenot's, because Terry Fontenot has definitely been good at drafting and trading for star-studded players. So we're going to wait and see. We're going to wait and see.